Fear is not weakness. It's a built-in alarm system. On a battlefield, that alarm can save lives, but it can also hijack decisions. When fear spikes, people see less, hear more, and guess faster. Armies have always tried to shape that moment, make the enemy hesitate, misread, or run. Today we follow fear like a weapon, an invisible force that can win before steel ever touches. Fear starts in the body, faster pulse, shallow breath, tight muscles. The brain then tries to explain those signals by inventing stories, often the worst ones. That's why uncertainty feels heavier than danger you can see. A soldier can fight a visible threat, but not an unseen one that might be anywhere. Commanders learn to manage bodies first, breathing, posture, routines, because calmer bodies make clearer minds. Most panic comes from not knowing. How many, where, when, is the flank safe? A single unanswered question can grow into 10 terrifying guesses. Scouts exist to fight that fear by turning mystery into information. But scouts can also bring bad news, and the way leaders present that news matters. The same facts can create calm preparation or a stampede. Before contact, soldiers imagine the battle. At contact, reality arrives as noise, shouting, drums, horns, and the thunder of feet. The brain treats sudden sound like proof of danger, even if nothing has happened yet. That is why armies used controlled noise, drums and signals, to replace chaotic noise with predictable rhythm. If your ears can follow a beat, your body can follow an order. Fear does not always cause running. Sometimes it causes freezing, like a system rebooting under stress. In that second, time stretches, choices feel impossible, and the body waits for a clearer signal. Leaders learn to anticipate the freeze and give simple, immediate actions. Kneel, breathe, step, anything that restarts motion. The first side to break the freeze often gains the initiative. Initiative is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. When a unit acts first, moves, flanks, shouts, signals, it forces the enemy to react while already stressed. Reaction under stress is where mistakes happen. That's why surprise attacks feel bigger than they are. Fear magnifies them. Winning initiative means winning the first story the enemy tells themselves. Fear spreads socially. One person flinches and 10 people glance. 10 people glance and 100 start imagining danger. In tight formations, emotion moves faster than information. Leaders countered this by controlling what soldiers could see and hear. Shields up, eyes forward, follow the banner, follow the drum. Organization is a firewall against panic. Soldiers watch leaders for emotional cues. A calm leader can reduce panic without speaking. A frantic leader multiplies fear, even if the plan is good. That's why military culture prizes composure. It's contagious in the opposite direction. Calm spreads the belief that someone sees the whole board. Belief buys time, and time buys choices. Night turns normal sounds into threats. A snapped twig becomes an ambush. A shadow becomes an army. When vision is limited, the brain overcompensates with imagination. That's why night raids can win with psychology. The enemy fights the darkness more than the attackers. Control of light is control of fear. By the end of Act 1, the key lesson is simple. Fear is terrain. It shapes what soldiers notice, what they ignore, and what they think is possible. Armies don't just fight landscapes, they fight perception. Next, we see how surprise and noise can spike fear so fast that discipline collapses in seconds. The battle often begins in the nervous system, before it begins on the ground. An ambush works because it steals your timeline. 1 second you're walking, the next second you're reacting. The brain hates lost control, so it panics and grabs the fastest story. We're surrounded. Even a small ambush can feel like a huge one if it comes from hidden angles. That's why smart armies scout routes, watch tree lines, and keep spacing. Fear management by design. Sound tells the brain how big a threat is. A single shout sounds like one person. A chorus sounds like a flood. That's why armies use drums, horns, and synchronized chanting to feel larger than life. The goal wasn't only communication, it was intimidation. If the enemy believes you are many, they will behave as if you are many. Speed changes psychology. A fast threat triggers the brain's impact alarm and reduces time for thinking. Cavalry charges, chariots, and later tanks all exploit the same human reflex. Step aside, break the line, survive. Even if the charge is blunted, it can still break cohesion. The target is not bodies, it's spacing. Night raids don't need large forces. They need confusion. If defenders can't see who is attacking, they can't measure the threat, and fear fills the missing bath. Rumors start instantly. The gate is lost, the camp is burning, the commander is down. A raid becomes a psychological wildfire. Good defenses rely on signals, passwords, and calm routines. Otherwise, the dark wins. Under fear, people widen their personal space. They step away from danger, and the line becomes thin. Thin lines invite breakthroughs. Once a gap appears, fear focuses on that gap like a spotlight. Everyone stares, fewer act, and the gap grows. Leaders counter this with drills that teach close in as a reflex. Discipline is fear turned into geometry. Battlefields are information disasters. Smoke hides reality. Echoes distort direction. A single scream can be misread as defeat, even if the line is holding. Fear thrives on misinterpretation. The side that preserves clear signals, flags, drums, runners, keeps its mind intact. Signals are anti-fear technology. A clear horn blast, a flag motion, a runner with a simple message, these reduce uncertainty. When soldiers know what to do next, fear has less room to invent stories. That's why armies simplify commands under stress. Complexity dies first in battle, simple signals survive. Fear compresses time. 10 seconds feels like one. People rush decisions, and rushing creates mistakes. Some commanders exploited this by threatening multiple directions at once, forcing the enemy to answer every possibility. Others fought the clock by slowing the unit down. Breathe, align, step. The winner often isn't faster, it's steadier. A panic run begins as a small decision. I'm safer back there. But movement communicates. When one person runs, others assume they saw something real. Fear turns motion into evidence. Soon the unit isn't fleeing the enemy, it's fleeing each other's conclusions. The domino effect is why leaders build reserves and barriers to stop motion from becoming rumor. By Act 2, we've seen the truth of shock. Surprise and noise can break discipline before a fight is decided. A clever ambush, a night raid, or a sudden charge can win by forcing the enemy to misread the situation. Next, we follow fear's most dangerous partner. Uncertainty turned into stories, rumors, deception, and psychological tricks that travel faster than armies. Rumors are fear with legs. They spread through whispers, exaggerated shadows, and half-seen movements. An army hearing they're everywhere begins to guard every direction, and guarding every direction means guarding none well. The goal of rumor warfare is to create wasted motion. Wasted motion becomes exhaustion. If fear is driven by numbers, then lying about numbers is powerful. Decoy campfires make an army look larger. Fake marching routes make an enemy guard the wrong road. When the enemy cannot count you, they cannot plan calmly. They begin to imagine the worst and spend resources fighting ghosts. Deception turns fear into a budgeting problem. Banners and uniforms exist to reduce confusion, but deception flips them into tools of confusion. A fake banner in the wrong place can make defenders hesitate. Is that ours? A moment of hesitation is a crack in discipline. That crack becomes fear because it suggests the system is broken. Deception is the art of renting the enemy's doubt. Some deceptions use sight. Others use sound. Extra drums in the woods can sound like reinforcements. Dust clouds kicked up by a small group can look like a huge column from far away. The enemy responds to what they think they see. Fear fills in the rest with certainty. In that gap, the deceiver steals initiative. Encirclement is terrifying because it implies no safe direction. Even if the enemy is not actually surrounding you, the idea can paralyze you. Armies exploit this by threatening flanks and rear, forcing defenders to split attention. Split attention is tunnel vision's cousin. You stare at every edge, and miss the center. The spinning compass is fear made visible. A siege is fear stretched over days, not because of constant fighting, but because of constant waiting. Waiting makes rumors louder, and small losses feel catastrophic. Inside walls, uncertainty becomes a daily weather. Outside walls, besiegers use visibility, fires, drums, towers, to remind defenders they are watched. The mind surrenders before the gate does. Not all propaganda is text. It can be symbols, songs, rituals, and stage scenes. The point is to change what people feel is inevitable. If soldiers believe defeat is coming, they conserve energy for retreat instead of offense. If they believe victory is certain, they take risks. Propaganda is fear management at scale. Sometimes deception invites courage, not fear. A false retreat tempts the enemy to chase, to believe they are winning, to break formation. Then the trap closes. The psychology is simple. Victory tastes so good that discipline dissolves. The best traps don't force you, they invite you. Fear and pride are both levers. Fear grows when messages stop. If a commander cannot communicate, every unit becomes alone. Lone units imagine the worst and act selfishly. That's why armies target messengers, signals, and bridges. Breaking communication is breaking shared reality. Once shared reality breaks, fear writes the next chapter. By Act 3, fear is no longer just a moment, it's a message. Deception, rumors, and broken communication can reshape a battlefield without a single clash. The mind makes maps from incomplete data, and those maps decide movement. Next, we study the counterweapon, discipline. How do armies train the mind so fear doesn't steer the whole machine? Training exists because fear steals thinking time. When the brain panics, it searches for the easiest known action. Drill makes the right action the easiest action. Over weeks, hold, align, and advance become automatic, even when hands shake. Discipline is not cruelty, it is a psychological safety rail. It keeps the unit from falling apart. A formation is not only tactical, it is emotional. Standing shoulder to shoulder reduces loneliness, and loneliness increases fear. When soldiers feel supported, they take braver actions. When they feel isolated, they protect themselves first. That's why gaps are dangerous. They don't just open space, they open doubt. Cohesion is courage made social. Big plans are built from tiny decisions. Under fear, tiny decisions become hard. Do I step left or right? Do I kneel or stand? Do I look forward or back? Officers exist to remove that burden by deciding for the group. When decisions are centralized, the unit moves as one brain. That unity is terrifying to face. It tells the enemy, they won't break. In chaos, people look for a fixed point. A banner, a drum, a horn. These are anchors that keep the unit oriented. Losing that anchor can feel like losing the map. That's why armies protect standards and signals, not just for symbolism, but for psychology. An anchor keeps fear from spinning into confusion. Fear consumes energy. Hungry, sleepless soldiers panic faster. That's why logistics is also psychology. Food, water, rest, and predictable routines keep the nervous system from snapping. Even small comforts, warm soup, dry socks, a song, can stabilize a unit. Morale is built in quiet hours, not only in charges. Armies that care for bodies often win minds. Fear is not only fear of the enemy, it is fear of shame, of being the one who breaks. Armies use honor codes to bind individuals to the group. This can be inspiring, but it can also be heavy. Either way, it changes behavior. People hold longer because they feel watched by comrades. Social pressure becomes a second armor. Training often includes controlled fear. Loud noises, sudden orders, smoke, and confusion without real danger. The goal is to teach the body, this feeling is survivable. When soldiers learn that adrenaline is normal, they stop interpreting it as doom. Controlled stress inoculates the mind. It's like practicing storms in a safe harbor. Then, when the real storm arrives, the hands remember what to do. Confidence is accumulated evidence. If a unit survives a patrol, holds a line once, or executes a drill under pressure, it gains a resource, belief. Belief reduces fear because it changes predictions. Instead of imagining collapse, soldiers imagine recovery. That doesn't remove danger, but it changes how danger feels. Confidence is psychological armor, forged by repetition. Discipline is a mirror contest. If your discipline holds, the enemy's fear grows. Why aren't they running? The attacker then takes bigger risks, overextends, and creates openings. Many victories come from making the enemy lose their routine. Disruption is the goal. Hit the flank, strike the signal, create confusion. Fear follows disruption, like thunder follows lightning. Act 4 reveals a powerful idea. Discipline is technology. It turns fear into predictable action, and predictable action beats chaos. But fear does not live only in soldiers. It lives in cities, families, and whole societies. Next, we follow morale beyond the front line, where fear becomes hunger, waiting, and the dread of loss. Morale is energy stored in belief. It powers endurance, patience, and courage. But like any battery, it drains faster under constant stress, hunger, cold, isolation, and uncertainty. Armies try to protect morale with letters, songs, rituals, and visible progress. The enemy tries to drain it with siege, raids, and rumors. Winning morale can win a war without winning every fight. Hunger changes thinking. It narrows attention and turns long-term strategy into short-term survival. Under hunger, rumors become more believable, and anger becomes easier to ignite. Sieges exploit this by turning days into a slow countdown. Fear becomes physical. Not fear of a blade, but fear of emptiness. That emptiness can break unity. Sometimes the worst fear is boredom with teeth. Long waits make the mind hunt for threats. Every creak, every bird, every distant shout becomes a possible alarm. That constant alertness exhausts soldiers faster than marching. Clever commanders rotate duties, create routines, and give small tasks to prevent spiraling thoughts. Occupation of the mind is a defense. Soldiers worry about home, and families worry about the front. Those worries echo each other. When families feel safe, soldiers fight with fewer distractions. When families panic, soldiers imagine collapse behind them. That's why states manage home front morale with reassurance, rituals, and controlled information. The battlefield extends into kitchens and streets. Fear can be used to deter. If a commander punishes rebellion harshly, others may hesitate. But fear is a blunt tool. Too much fear creates more enemies and makes resistance desperate. History is full of leaders trying to balance deterrence and legitimacy. The psychological question is always the same. Will fear produce obedience or backlash? The answer depends on trust. When civilians flee, they carry fear like luggage. Roads fill with stories. The bridge is gone. The town fell. The army is near. Most are unverified, but fear makes them feel true. Refugee flows also change military decisions by clogging routes and draining resources. War psychology includes crowds, not just troops. Fear moves populations before armies move lines. When escape routes close, fear changes shape. It can become despair, or it can become focus. A last stand works psychologically when a group believes holding buys time for something valuable. Without that belief, the same situation becomes panic. Leaders try to create meaning. Hold for the gate, hold for the bridge, hold for the families. Meaning is fuel when fear would otherwise empty the tank. Even after victory, fear lingers. Soldiers expect a counterattack, a trap, or betrayal. Exhaustion makes the mind suspicious. This is why disciplined armies secure positions, count supplies, and reset routines immediately after success. The psychological battle continues in the quiet minutes after noise. Calm after chaos is a skill. Reassurance is powerful, but it must be credible. If leaders promise safety and fail, fear returns stronger because trust breaks. If leaders tell the truth but provide a plan, fear can stabilize. The best commanders speak in actions. Warm food, organized lines, predictable patrols. In war, trust is a weapon, and fear is what happens when trust runs out. Act 5 shows that fear is not confined to the front line. It flows through walls, streets, and families, shaping morale like weather. Siege, hunger, and uncertainty drain the will to fight. Next, we enter the age of industrial war, where machines amplify fear, unseen shells, constant noise, and threats that arrive without warning. When technology changes, fear changes with it. Industrial war introduced a new terror. Threats you cannot see. A shell doesn't look you in the eye. It arrives from far away, chosen by coordinates, not emotion. That randomness feels unfair, and unfairness feels frightening. Soldiers begin to fear the sky and the map more than the enemy line. When danger is faceless, imagination supplies the face. The scariest moment can be the pause before the sound. Anticipation keeps the nervous system stuck in ready mode, draining energy. Over time, soldiers start reacting to every sound, even harmless ones. Medics and leaders learn to normalize the body's response. Breathe, ground, focus on tasks. Surviving industrial fear required psychological maintenance. Some weapons attack the mind by attacking breathing. Even when protected, the mask changes how the world feels. Muffled sound, narrowed vision, and the constant reminder of danger. The fear is partly physical and partly symbolic. The air itself is unsafe. Industrial war made invisible threats common. Invisible threats create lasting anxiety. Trench life turns fear into routine. The same patrol, the same watch, the same distant rumble. Routine can stabilize the mind, but it can also trap it, because every repetition reminds you the threat never leaves. The brain starts listening for patterns, then panics when patterns change. Industrial fear is often fear of the next change. When fear is constant, the brain can overload. People may tremble, go silent, or struggle to react. Not because they are cowards, but because the nervous system is exhausted. Modern medicine would later understand trauma and stress responses better, but soldiers lived it first. The key point is humane. Fear is biology. Fear isolated is fear magnified. Fear shared becomes manageable because it becomes normal. Soldiers develop humor, rituals, and small friendships to keep the mind from collapsing. A joke is not denial, it's ventilation. Ventilation keeps the pressure from exploding. In industrial war, camaraderie was often the strongest armor. At night, unseen threats feel closer. Distant flashes become a cruel clock. Boom, pause, boom. The mind starts predicting the next one and dreads being wrong. Prediction under fear turns into obsession. Some units countered with noise masking, songs, steady signals, and tasks that occupy attention. If you can keep a rhythm, you can keep a self. Open ground is psychologically brutal because it removes cover and increases visibility. The body feels exposed, and exposure triggers fear even before danger arrives. Commanders try to reduce exposure time with timing, smoke, and coordinated movement. The moment of stepping out is often the hardest decision of all. It's fear versus duty, 1 foot at a time. When the noise stops, the body keeps listening. Hands still shake, ears still ring, and the brain replays what might happen next. This is why rest and decompression matter. Armies that rotate troops, provide safe shelters, and enforce sleep protect their long-term fighting ability. Fear is a resource drain, and recovery is strategy. The mind needs a ceasefire too. Industrial war magnified fear by making danger invisible, constant, and random. The nervous system became a battlefield. Next, we leave the trenches and follow fear upward and outward, into the sky, into cities, and into radio waves. When threats come from above and stories come through speakers, fear becomes a society-wide experience. Air power changed fear's geometry. You couldn't see the enemy's eyes, only a distant silhouette overhead. The threat could arrive anywhere, and that uncertainty made everyone feel like a target. Sirens became psychological triggers. The sound alone could raise heart rates before anything happened. Air raids were as much about breaking morale as breaking buildings. Fear became a citywide weather. Shelters reduce danger, but can increase panic if crowded and uncertain. Tight spaces amplify sound, and sound amplifies fear. Leaders learn to manage shelters like miniature units, clear roles, calm voices, routines for children, and simple information. When people know what to do, they breathe better. Fear is easier to carry when it is organized. Even civilians become a formation. Radio lets fear travel instantly. A rumor can reach a city before an army does. Broadcasts can calm, warn, or terrify, depending on tone. Because listeners can't verify what they hear, they fill gaps with imagination. That makes radio a powerful psychological tool, good or bad. In modern war, information is a front line. Modern armies drop leaflets and messages to influence behavior. Surrender, evacuate, distrust your leaders. Even without words, images can signal inevitability. The goal is to make the enemy feel alone and doomed. That feeling can cause units to dissolve without a decisive battle. Psychology turns the battlefield into a persuasion contest. Repeated alarms can train the body to fear a sound. Over time, the sound itself becomes a threat, even when nothing happens. This is conditioning. The nervous system learns associations. War planners sometimes exploit this by using alarms and sudden noise to exhaust morale. Exhausted morale makes mistakes. The most brutal weapon is the one that never sleeps. Large formations create a psychological ceiling. We can't stop that. When people feel powerless, fear becomes resignation. Resignation is dangerous because it reduces action. No repairs, no defense, no coordination. States countered by emphasizing resilience. Fire brigades, shelters, and shared routines. The goal is to turn powerless fear into organized response. Organization is hope with tools. Modern command rooms turn war into dots on maps. That abstraction can reduce empathy, but it can also increase anxiety because you fear what the dots might mean. A moving dot could be a raid or a false alarm. Decisions must be made quickly with incomplete data. That is fear at the strategic level. Not personal danger, but responsibility under uncertainty. The mind can still panic, even in a chair. When fear lasts months, it becomes fatigue. Fatigue reduces attention, patience, and empathy. People become jumpy, then numb, then jumpy again. This cycle is why long wars can feel like they change a society's personality. Leaders try to manage fatigue with rotations, holidays, and small victories. Without relief, even disciplined systems crack. Resilience is learned. Breathing, grounding, buddy systems, and predictable routines can reduce panic spikes. Societies teach children where to go, what to do, and how to stay calm. Armies teach soldiers similar skills. The aim isn't to erase fear, it's to shorten it. Faster recovery means better decisions. Recovery is a tactical advantage. Act 7 shows fear scaling up, from individual nerves to cities and entire nations. Sirens, radio waves, and distant threats make fear a shared atmosphere. Next, we pull all the lessons together: how fear works, how it spreads, and how humans fight back with training, trust, and resilience. The final act is not about removing fear. Fear is a loop. First comes uncertainty, then the brain writes a story, then the body acts on that story. If the story is "we're doomed," action becomes panic. If the story is "we have a plan," action becomes discipline. Armies try to hijack the enemy's story while protecting their own. The core fight is over prediction. To create fear, armies attack the senses. Surprise steals time. Noise steals calm. Unseen threats steal certainty. These tools work across eras, from night raids to air raids to information shocks. The method changes. The nervous system stays the same. Fear is the oldest weapon that still works. Resisting fear is not about being fearless. It's about shortening panic and restoring function. Training makes actions automatic. Cohesion makes people brave together. Trust makes orders believable. When these three exist, fear still happens. But it doesn't drive the steering wheel. It becomes background noise. A common myth says courage means feeling nothing. Real courage is feeling fear and still moving. Another myth says panic is personal failure. Often it's biology and exhaustion. Understanding fear makes armies more humane and more effective. It changes training from punishment to preparation, and it helps societies understand veterans and civilians who lived through alarms. Fear is a tool, but tools have ethics. Soldiers fear each other in combat. Civilians fearing indiscriminate harm is different. History shows moments where fear was used to break societies, not armies. Tiny Titans history stays educational and humane. We study the psychology to understand it, not to glorify it. The strongest defense is resilience and protected civilians. Across history, the props change but the fear patterns repeat. Ancient horns, medieval charges, musket volleys, artillery barrages, sirens, and radio rumors all aim at the same system. The human nervous system is the constant. That's why understanding fear helps you understand warfare across centuries. Fear is the connective tissue of conflict. When fear rises, humans use simple tools. Breathe, look at a buddy, follow a routine, focus on a task. These aren't modern inventions. Armies and communities discovered them through hard experience. Small actions keep the mind from spiraling. They also rebuild trust, because shared routines create shared reality. Resilience is collective skill. Fear can win wars when it breaks discipline, drains morale, and shatters trust. Fear can also lose wars when it pushes leaders into rash mistakes and brutal overreach. The side that manages fear better, through training, communication, and ethics, usually outlasts the side that merely spikes it. The true contest is control. Control of attention, control of stories, control of recovery. In warfare, psychology is logistics for the mind. War pressures people to become less human, less empathetic, less patient, less honest. Fear accelerates that pressure because it makes cruelty feel like safety. But history also shows people staying human under fear, helping strangers, sharing food, refusing panic. That humanity protects morale and ethics at the same time. Understanding fear helps us recognize those choices, and it reminds us that psychology is not just tactics, it's responsibility. Fear is one of history's most powerful forces because it changes what people think is possible. If you understand fear, you understand why armies break, why leaders gamble, and why societies endure. If you want more family-friendly stories that explain the systems behind the battles, stick with us. Subscribe to Tiny Titans History for more episodes on strategy, psychology, and the turning points that shape the world.